Hello and welcome to Golden Geography. Today we're going to be talking about changing spaces, making places, which is part of the OCR A-level exam specification. And here within this unit we look at places, what makes them quite distinctive, unique, and specifically today we're going to be looking at key question 2, which is how do we understand places? We're going to be thinking a little bit about how people see and experience and understand place in different ways, and also how places are represented through different contrasting formal and informal agencies. So to start with 2A, people see, experience and understand place in different ways, and this can also change over time. So to start with, we need to think a little bit about the complexities that exist when trying to define a place, and particularly the idea of space versus place. A place is a space that has meaning, and that's the big difference between places and space. Space will have a latitude and longitude, it will have a geolocation, but very often it is meaningless. So if you've never been to Australia, you know it exists, but it has no meaning to you. But if you have been there, it's a place that has meaning and significance to you. That's the key thing here. So if we think about a classroom, well, your geography classroom is a place that has meaning to you, but to your parents or your friends who don't study A-level geography, it's just a space. It's somewhere you go. It has no meaning. So places are meaningful, and that's important. It will vary from person to person, and it might change over time. As you get older and you leave school or college, your classroom may not have the same meaning as a place as it does today. You might find in 10 years' time, you can't remember what your classroom was like. It will just become a space, part of your memory. Well, people perceive places in different ways, and this is often based on their own personal background. It can be based on their identity, it could be based on their age, gender, sexuality, religion, and even the role that they have within society. So people's identity, the way that people see themselves and their role and what they do will influence how they view somewhere. Their age, as people get older, their views, their interests change. A child might view a playground as somewhere really interesting, but an old person might hate playgrounds because they're full of children that they trip over and are loud and noisy. Gender can influence how people think about places. Men very often do not consider walking around at night an issue, but women do because of their gender. And there also might be places that women feel more comfortable going to compared to men. So if you go into the shops and you go to the part, the aisles that have all the kind of hair and shampoo bits, women quite happy to wander down where the feminine products are. Men might get a little bit more embarrassed. Sexuality can have an impact too on how people perceive something. So there are parts of the UK that have this kind of ghetto ideal. Ghetto is a place which has people who are brought together, that associate with each other because of a similar background. So parts of Brighton, particularly Cape Town, are an area where people of a similar sexual background, homosexuals, feel safe. They share that area. They perceive that area as theirs, their home, their kind of protected zone. Those people who live in Brighton who are heterosexual may not view that place in the same way. Religion can be important too. When people look at, say, a big old historic cathedral, some might view it with religious perspective. They might see it as their religious home and it have a very special sanctification to it. Whereas others who are non-religious just go, that's a nice old building. So here, for example, we have a picture of Buckingham Palace and King Charles. For him, this is somewhere that represents his kingship, his sovereignty. It is somewhere that he thinks of very much as a place of work. whereas for other people, they might view it as a historic building or a place of interest. People often have an emotional attachment to places as well. So there'll be some places that people love. It might be their home, it might be their favourite part of the beach. They'll have a positive attachment to it. They can also have negative attachments to places where they have sad memories or places they don't like going, like the dentist. And you can sometimes see this reflected in the infrastructure, the buildings that we have. So here we've got two pictures of terraced housings. One on the right, which is loved and is well maintained, probably owner occupied, but that is reflecting how people feel about their home. Whereas those on the left have been abandoned, derelict, left to run down because the owners don't have an emotional attachment to it. Globalization can often influence what's happening with places and how we feel about them too. Globalization is how our world is becoming more and more interconnected, and that is driven by world economies and trade, transport, but it is also the exchange of goods and cultures and ideas like democracy. And that can influence how we view a place. If you see an event happen on the news, a volcanic eruption or a war breakout, you might view that as a negative place. But you are aware of it because of globalization. And tied into globalization is something called the time-space compression. And that is that over the time, our understanding of places has changed because our knowledge of them, because of globalization, has improved. If we go back 500 years, the best we really had was horse-drawn carriages or sailing ships, and it would take a very long time to get from one place to another, for information or products to travel from one place to another. But in the last 500 years, we've had technological developments with transport, but also now telephones, mobiles, internet means that we can have and share information almost instantly. That means we've become much more exposed to much global influences, more features and influences from other parts of the world. That is changing our understanding of place. Okay, 2B. How are places represented through different contrasting agencies, formal and informal? So let's start with the informal. This involves a huge range of different forms of media, art, literature, graffiti, and we've got some here. They're all representing London. It could be photos or bits of art, graffiti by Banksy. It could be films like the Bond films or EastEnders. They all tell you a little bit about London. Even historical, older textbooks like the Oliver Twist stories tell you about London, tell you a bit about what it was like. But these are all very subjective. They give you little snippets. They represent London in very singular ways. They may not give you a holistic or overview of London, but it does give you an impression, right? And that, particularly when we're looking at TV and films, is what they're all about. It's to kind of create that mindset, that landscape in our minds where these stories are set. So it can give you a really interesting overview and represent places in very interesting ways. And for us, as consumers of that, we need to then kind of work out what is this place actually like? How much of EastEnders is fictitious? How much of it is actually true and actually telling me a little bit about London? And then we have our formal statistics that we can look at, our formal representation of place. Probably the most well known is the census, and that can tell us a little bit about the populations that we have in these areas. But we also have crime statistics too. Both the census and crime statistics and other statistical data tell us a little bit about place. Their numerical data can tell us about the people who live there. You can also have geolocated data. It could be data or geospatial data. It can be data that represents a place through imagery tied into a very specific location. So a big difference between formal and informal, but together they give you a really nice perception of place. And it would be good to choose a place and find out about both the informal and formal data it's showing. Okay, so do a little review, pause the video. You've got some of the key points here. Just colour them. Green, get it, absolutely happy days. Amber, not sure, need a review. Red, 100% need to start again. Think about those topics and concepts all over. And if it is a red, just pause the video, rewind it and watch it again. Thanks for listening.